p.m. We're doing in-person and virtual option. We welcome our online attendees. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for joining us here in person. I'm really excited about this evening. This has been something we've been looking forward to for actually quite some time. We just got some motivation to get it done. The Yamhill City Council has invited you to join us in attending a strategic planning doing work session meeting. The City of Yamhill as a community has been expressing ideas, hopes, and desires for a thriving community for several years now. It is time to unite all the ideas and concepts that we have all been thinking about for our community. The City Council is inviting the Yamhill residents, the city staff, the Planning Commission, the Economic Development Committee, and the Yamhill Downtown Association to be forward-thinking in the direction we will envision pursuing our Yamhill community. And I'm glad you all are here, and I look forward to hearing your input and answers and your ideas and all the things that we're going to be brainstorming here tonight. I would like to introduce Mr. Doug Rux, recently retired Community Development Director for the City of Newburgh.
Hey, retirement.
He has volunteered to share with the City of Yamhill his knowledge, expertise, and extensive 38 years of experience in community development. The council is excited for the opportunity to glean from Doug's inspirations, ideas, and direction for a path forward. Thank you, Doug, for being here. We're going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And those here at the round table, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself. For council, that will be roll call, essentially. Introduce yourself and let us know how you are in support of the city in your roles that you do. And I'll start. Yvette Potter, Mayor. I support the city as a mayor.
Oh, Doug Rux, retired. And we'll get into more formal introductions, but as the mayor said, I'm retired from the city of Newburgh, so I've been doing this kind of work for 38 years. I'll give you a little bit more depth when we get into another different type of introduction.
Greg Raven, that I support anyway that's asked of me. There were many hats, and I'm noticing from the camera that I can't see my hair because it matches the wall. Jason Wofford, Facilities Manager, City's Infrastructure.
Kara Corrigan, I work part-time for the city as the financial clerk.
Philip Higgins, Yamhill Downtown Association, YC High School, Class 86.
Ken Moore, Chair of the Planning Commission.
I'm Marcy Hadeen, I'm City Council member.
Shay Corrigan, City Council member. I support the city however I can, like Chief does, but I don't wear quite as many hats. And I'm not retired yet, but I'm looking forward to it someday.
And I'm Tim Askey, on City Council.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to start with Doug. He's going to give his presentation, and then the roundtable will be working with him in some response question, brainstorming type thing. We will give an opportunity for those in the audience, those attendees, to give their voice and their opinion. We do want to hear what you have to say. So either make notes or jot down what you want to say so you don't forget it when the time comes and the opportunity presents itself for you too. All right, with that, please.
All right, thank you. So this kind of all started when Philip reached out to me, which then led to conversations with the mayor, and
I wasn't respecting your retirement.
as I told Philip, my retirement lasted 45 days before I started doing things again. But I think this was a unique opportunity to have a conversation with all of you because of my conversation with the mayors. You want to do everything all at once. And my response to her in our phone conversation was, you can't. You can't eat the elephant all at once. So a little bit more about myself is that I grew up in a town that's smaller than Yamhill. So I grew up between Coburg and Harrisburg. So if you know where that's at the other end of the valley. So I was a country kid. My backyard was from Harrisburg to the top of the Coburg Hills up the McKenzie River to the Mohawk River, down the McKenzie River to the confluence with the Willamette, and from the Willamette all the way to Harrisburg. So that was our backyard. So we knew all the farmers and the ranchers and so forth, and all we had to do, no cell phones back then. Chief, I'm getting gray like you, is that, you get on the landline and you call the night before and say, hey, we're gonna go out and we're gonna go dove hunting on your property, or we're gonna go out, we're going duck hunting or goose hunting. It was always, just make sure you close the gate. Absolutely, always did. So that's why when I grew up, in a town that I grew up outside of, we were 400 people. So it was really small. It's now an historic district and so forth. Coburg's grown. When you see Coburg now, you see it from the freeway, and all you see is where all the RV manufacturers and stuff were at. Well, when I grew up, there was the Country Inn, Country Squire, and that's where all of the Pac-8 football teams stayed when they came to play the Ducks in football. They never stayed in Eugene. So we'd see the buses come the back roads because it was easier to go from the Eugene airport up to Harrisburg and then back to get to the hotel than it was to go all the way into Eugene and then come back north again. So we had a small grocery store, Ben's Tri-C Market. We had Mama Freddy's, best food, boy, she could cook. We had one gas station in town that was also the fabrication shop. We had the Coburg Inn, which is where the people from Eugene came and had their really fancy dinners. And we had a mini mart. We have City Hall. Council meetings were held by pulling the fire trucks out of the bays and then sitting at the tables and holding the meetings. And then when we're done, we all had to pick them all up. One of my best friends, his grandfather was the mayor for decades of Coburg. And so that's how I got indoctrinated into kind of government at the young old age of 7 or 8 years old and going to council meetings. So I've been going to council meetings a long, long time. So it was a small town. Everybody knew everybody, and it was agricultural. And so we all grew up as kids and worked on farms, up by 4 a.m., down at the shop by 5, moving irrigation pipe as soon as the sun came up, work all day long, harvest season came. So that was my upbringing. Later I went to school. I'm a duck-billed platypus. I spent 2 years at Oregon State, 2 years at Oregon. So I wore my Oregon jacket tonight, but I've taken it off. And then I went back and got a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the U of O. So I worked for a variety of cities, small cities. I worked for council of governments down in Douglas County. So I worked for all of the small cities, a few hundred people. Also with the city of Roseburg. Worked in Tualatin for 22 years. Did a lot of creative projects there and recruited high-tech companies. Love doing economic development work. Bread and butter is doing land use planning. I've had my consulting business since 2010. Worked for the city of Salem. So I've worked for small cities of a couple hundred people to the second largest city in the state, with the city of Salem. Like I said, I've recently retired from the city of Newburgh. We've had introductions of the council members, but it would be helpful for me if we could get some introductions of our audience as well, just so I have some idea of who you are.
Bubba King, Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce Board President, and running for Yamhill County Commissioner. So very interested in what your future.
Robert Davis, I'm the founder of the Yamhill Neighborhood Association and represent the voices in the town.
Well, I just live in Yamhill, but I'm like really good friends with Shelley Reimer, so.
And I'm Shelley Reimer, just listening in tonight.
Kathy Phillips, lived in Yamhill my whole life. We're out of town.
Mary O'Malley, live on a farm outside of Yamhill, and my friend Jenny Morrison, who's in the Yamhill Downtown Association, is out of town for a meeting and asked me to come and watch the meeting.
Rocky Lossley. I'm a citizen, but I have served in government for many, many years as a volunteer.
Sue Richardson, and I have been here for 49 years, and I have a business that's been here for 40 years. locally, and I'm on the Yamhill Economic Development Committee and the Planning Commission.
Thank you all. Ann, in the back?
Jim Hirsch. I'm from Yamhill Town Community Facebook page. And also live in rural Yamhill. I've been the city clerk for 25 years.
I'm Buzz, I'm Shay and Harrison, they're up there.
You're starting at a young age, that's good. Like I said, I started when I was about 7. So in my conversations with the mayor, we were chatting and I mentioned a little bit earlier, she was talking about, well, we want to do it all at once. I made the comment, you can't. You can't eat the elephant all at once. You gotta find out how you're going to do that. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort to get it done. So for me, the purpose, and hopefully it will help all of you, is really want to create some dialogue. And that's amongst yourselves, with the community members, with the business members, of what you want to achieve as a community as a whole. City council, you have your fiduciary responsibility with your budget, and there's certain things that you are obligated and required to do as a municipal corporation. But there are other organizations within the city that do not have those same parameters or boundaries, but they bring a lot of wealth of energy and knowledge, and it can be resources that they bring to the table. The next piece of the purpose of this is to identify what the important issues are for Yamhill. Mentioned to the mayor, when I got here this evening, I did some background research, got on the web. Used to live in Yamhill County, so I'm like Philip, I used to ride bicycles, I don't anymore. But it was, one of my trips was out here and then down to Carlton and out towards the city farms and McMinnville and back around and so forth. So I've seen it both from a car and from a bicycle, almost being hit all the time by cars. So Philip understands that one. So what are those big important issues? And then we want to talk about what are some possible paths forward to address the things that we're going to capture. And so I've got the flip charts here. I'm going to take a bunch of notes. They're sticky. I can stick them up against the wall. When I'm done, I know you're being recorded and you'll have minutes from your meeting and so forth, but I will get back to the mayor, a written summary that will have the agenda and any other information and so forth, so that you've got a complete record. So in our conversations thus far, we kind of tried to glean out of, what's kind of going on in Yamhill. And I've heard things about downtown. I've heard things about sports and recreation. I've heard things about art and culture. And those are all good. Those are things I hear commonly in communities, no matter what the size is, from very small to very, very large. You also, the city was awarded, so Walt's not here tonight, or is Walt online? So I know that the city applied for, you got some grants from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And so you got one grant to address the downtown, your commercial component of that was a code audit. And you got another one to address housing and your buildable land supply. So good, kudos for you. Because it does take financial resources to try to achieve what you want to achieve. But I do, and I'll bring this up again later, is when I was doing some background research on this, it was interesting to me looking at the different organizations and so forth and trying to get an understanding of what the different goals are or missions of the different organizations. And the irony of it was the only one that I found that had any goals was the school district. Didn't see any goals from any other organization. Not from the city, not from the fire district. The Downtown Association has a webpage and has information. Doesn't really say anything about goals. And I was kind of like, that's interesting. So you're really starting way back here if you've got these different community partners and members and organizations, but they're not articulating what their goals or their missions or their values or any of that information that's there. So you kind of got, I always tell people, it's the most difficult thing to do is to start with a whiteboard and come up with something. It's always easier to react. Well, tonight I'm going to start with a whiteboard. So we're going to go through a brainstorming session. So we're going to start with the people that are sitting at the table first. And through this, there is no right or wrong answer. There is no judgment that's being provided. All we're doing is getting your ideas. I'm going to capture them on the flip chart. And we'll log it all down. And in the end, I be able to kind of categorize information based upon topics and based upon what we hear this evening. You're not limited to one idea. You're limited to as many ideas as you have so we can capture as many as possible. There'll be some that members at the table and or the public, we kind of go, please don't, we don't want to do any judgment. We want to get all of that information out so that you have it, so that you will be able to then go back, refer to it, have discussions about it. What do you do with it? What are you going to prioritize and so forth? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The next thing that we'll get into after, we'll probably take a break after the brainstorming. I'm sure we will, so people can get a drink and use the restroom and so forth. Then we'll talk about options and for moving forward, what you can and cannot do. Again, there's a whole array of possibilities that are out there. Sound like a reasonable approach? Seeing heads nodding, so okay, that's good. So, Chief, you're fine. This is portable. So playing off the mayor's comment to me was about you want to do it all and you don't want to do it all at once. Is what do you want for Yamhill? I'm not using the word city because it has a connotation, but what do you want for Yamhill?
Are we all just jumping in?
Yeah, go for it. So you don't have to raise your hand.
What I think a very important thing, and it applies to most of us here, would be to preserve the downtown, the central business district overlay by declaring it a historic district and the guidelines that need to be made to make that happen.
So the Yamhill Downtown Association, our slogan is keep it Yamhill. And so when we formed the organization, that was sort of one of the things that, at least from our informal community outreach, that we were told is that we wanted to keep it with the town with its own flavor. So not to gentrify in such a way that, you know, it becomes a Carlton, say, I mean, not to pick on our neighbor to the south here, but is to keep this sort of, I guess, rural community flavor as opposed to sort of being a very niche tourist destination.
Revitalization.
What's that?
Revitalization. My number one is public safety.
Good answer. When you get to come to work tomorrow.
I would also tag onto that revitalization also with the Yamhill Downtown Association hat on is one of the things that we routinely talk about is how do we create, you know, economic stability and economic opportunity within the town without actually sort of selling out into, you know, the easy wine country route.
Maintain historical value along with that small town community feel, while still increasing business opportunities.
Parks and recreation. Not the sitcom.
Saw the pickleball sign coming.
Parks
parks is a big topic. We have one, we have possibilities for more. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there.
Park development, yeah,
Go to 3.
we do have 3.
Isn't one really tiny though?
One's really tiny.
Yeah.
Television park.
Yeah.
It's still a park.
Still a park. It's getting a tree.
It's getting a
Progress, look at that.
Inadequate infrastructure.
Inadequate, okay.
So improved infrastructure.
Yeah. Or stop building.
Well, that's also obviously one of the concerns with, you know, the historic downtown core is, you know, what does that street infrastructure look like if somebody was to do a redevelopment project, right? Not you, but you're- Not good.
Yeah, along with that, increased capacity, sewer and water capacity.
Get a full-time city manager.
Maybe the city administrator.
Or city administrator.
So not speaking for the downtown association, but it would be nice to see some diversity in the housing stock. Yeah, because you either have 1970s ranches or $500,000 new stick built, and there's
More
nothing.
affordable type housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even workforce at 80 to 120 average median income as opposed to, you know, classically affordable, just reasonably priced.
Does anyone know about the small 400, 500 square foot homes they're building in Redmond?
So let's kind of keep on, what are you looking for Yamhill? Part of the facilitator's job.
More family activities,
Yeah, we've
bike
added
trails.
more subdivisions.
Okay.
And the same businesses, the same core is basically still here.
Need
I've
more
been here 49 years.
Family and youth also, if you want to have youth.
youth activities.
And nobody here does anything here.
Yeah, that's one of the things, in fact, that you definitely hit on. So when you look at the city itself, so there is industrial lands within the UGB, but that was just recently planted into hazelnuts, so it's probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So other than 8 blocks downtown, the entirety of the city is residential. So there's no opportunity that unless you work for the city, to actually like live here and work here. It's very, very commuter centric.
Well, and I'm a business person and trying to draw, I'm in construction and trying to draw employees. And you'd think that it would, you know, Newburgh, McMinnville, you'd think. No, where do the applicants come? Portland, Salem, you know, Dallas, and nobody's gonna drive that.
Right.
Nobody is going to drive that, and yet trying to get employees. And like I said, I've been in business here for 40 years, and it's a constant turnover because there's just no available workers.
See the central business district expanded a little bit more.
UGB conversations.
Sorry for my handwriting. I write like a doctor. I can understand my scribble.
Did we get sports parks? With camping opportunities?
Was that?
There's your elephant, Doug.
Yeah.
That's just the foot.
It's interesting, there's a lot more overlap on all those things than you probably think, once it gets through the filter.
100%.
Yeah.
Other things you're looking for the Yamhill community?
New City Hall.
One of the things too that precipitated this conversation, I'm not sure I said this out loud, but was also being able to have more control over what comes in to the central business district and in the commercial areas. So basically tuning up the zoning code, which I see we did get a grant for, but
We do City Hall / community center.
Slash library.
the Mabel Bud Memorial Library.
Yeah, that's whoever.
Yeah, she was actually at the library here in town. So above the Anita's building on Maple.
And then, Lawford's had a library in the, what was the Berkshire Hathaway building?
No, that's the same one.
Is that the same building?
Yeah, it was actually Mabel Bunn, who was Beverly Cleary's mom,
Okay.
actually had started the first library on the second floor.
Oh, I didn't know it was the second floor. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
Yeah, back when that was the North Yamhill Bank building. So,
Okay.
which was started by the Perkins family, which lived in the house the Rocky owns.
Nice.
Quite a history.
It does have quite a history.
Other ideas? Gotta have much. The
Preservation.
mayor said you wanna do it all, so
We do.
now's the time to get it up on the board.
Historical district preservation.
This guy's got an idea back here.
The big guns back there.
Go ahead, Buzz.
A bike park.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, let's replace that too.
Yeah, because.
Replace the skate park.
Yeah.
Accessing storefront improvement grants would be great. Some help with that.
Bike park / bike trail.
The dog park is the only thing that's been brought up.
Dog park's been brought up.
That gallery on my watch.
Together.
Kay had the community garden idea.
Yes.
I need to go on that spot that Van Dyke owns next to the park.
That's where she wants to put it.
That's a great place for it.
It's the only place that would be the
That's
best
a
place
place
for
for
it.
parking for Derby Day
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So I've heard,
It is.
so as we kind of think more about it, I've heard some stuff about infrastructure. What about transportation?
Okay, let's put parking on there. And safety for the highways. We were dissected by 2 state highways.
Yeah, really big thing that I would love to do before I die is find some money from ODOT to do lighted crosswalks on both of their rights of way on 240 and 47 in front of the schools.
I absolutely agree with that. As a parent who has kids that walk to school, it terrifies me if they are trying to cross 47 after 8 o'clock, which is when the crossing guards.
Jason and I have both looked into that, and ODOT pretty much is letting us be on our own.
Yeah.
Yeah, ODOT's metric is multiple fatalities and crashes. And so since there have been no children killed, it's not a priority.
And they've literally
That
said
is,
that.
they've said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And as of about 2 hours ago, of me looking, it's about $4,000 per device.
Which that's a very low threshold to get over. It's just getting them to give us the permission to put it in there right away. I mean, we can find the money, for it. It's just, we need the permission.
I've done work on that. I talked to you about it. So, yeah.
What about your local streets?
Jason?
Drainage.
Drainage improvement, I mean, just all the way around.
Jason is our motto, and that's still better than Carlton's.
What about the inside city water lines? Are those still old and need to be replaced? Or those need to be upgraded?
Yep, that's what we're doing.
I know you are. Put more ideas out there for you.
Did you get a dog park?
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be nice, and Jason, I don't.
I'll make sure I have it twice.
Yeah.
I'm a dog lover.
Jason, I don't wanna speak for you, but your little collection of buildings that's down there at the water treatment plant area.
Wastewater treatment.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to have that be one building instead of 6 of varying ages and condition? That would also help the park development concept if that was consolidated into one thing.
The only issue, we'll talk off after this, but
Yeah.
I'll talk to you about the park concept.
So Jason talked about storm drainage, but I don't think there's a house in the whole city of Yamhill that actually drains their gutters into the storm drain or storm sewers.
Every brand new house over the last 25 years drains into a storm drainage system.
Does it?
Yeah.
It goes where?
In the storm sewer.
Water treatment plant?
No,
No.
water treatment facility.
Wastewater treatment
Wastewater.
facility.
No, not the wastewater treatment plant. No, a storm pond.
No, not here.
I think Public Works would know.
Yeah, that's not accurate.
90% of it goes into our.
How's your water source, future water source?
Terrible.
Biggest thing in the west, drying of the west. What are you gonna do for water?
That was part of the infrastructure and sewer, water and sewer.
Storage reservoirs,
Connect up with Hillsborough.
intertie.
So I'm hearing some themes. Infrastructure. One. Hearing kind of I'll pull more generic, the parks recreation, which has a variety of things that fall underneath that. We're hearing about downtown, the commercial core. We've had one comment related to arts. What about
Sidewalks.
safe routes to schools?
Yeah, it'd be nice to get that grant finally.
We've applied several times.
Yes.
So Yamhill Community Club that puts on Derby Day, our summer activity. The money we raise from that goes to back into the park system somehow or another. We've upgraded the park, the playground equipment. And we'd like to see a community center down there. That's in our. Yeah, the Beulah Park, we concentrate on Beulah Park, basically.
I just kind of think out loud here. What about governance? You have different political bodies that serve different purposes. So we don't have anybody from the fire district here this evening. We don't have anybody from the school district here this evening. But from everybody in the room, do you have any perceptions about if there are needs associated with emergency services? Chief, you might know.
Marcy?
More staff here at the fire station, more volunteers.
Which they're working on that.
So, sure.
It's kind of that's one's close to home. My grandfather was a fire chief for Marion County Fire District 1. You know, his retirement, hey, we retired at about the same time. So yeah, I grew up around the fire service.
With the school district, we just had a meeting with them today, so we're updating the EOP and working with them. This and the school as a EOC. So updating our EOC.
Chief, for the record, will you say what EOP says means for?
Emergency Operations Plan and an Emergency Operations Center.
Takes training. Training. Other ideas?
You're talking about the schools, all the buildings in our school system are old, like really old. I mean, the middle school used to be the grade school. Sometimes they march the kids to the Mormon church to do schooling because the boiler's out. So I know the heat system down there is abominable.
Some new schools.
I mean, I went to all of them, so.
That tells you something.
Yeah, they've been around a while.
I grew up, yeah, we went into Covert to go to school, and so our gymnasium was a converted barn.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't a barn with a high roof to it, it was very low, so you could not literally stand at mid-court and try to make a basket because you would hit the rafters. Yes,
I'd like to see a 50 to 75 year strategic plan map identifying current commercial, future UGB, future school locations. So that when that map is created and identified for future growth, because we won't all be here in 50, 75 years, we have set a precedence at current date, looking out, and have identified future growth potential areas, future areas where a school could be located.
are you as a community seeing impacts or pressures from communities to your north? Forest Grove, Hillsborough, people looking for the smaller town feel, ambiance, culture and so forth. From any of you, what issues does that bring up that you think you might need to address?
One of the things, at least that I see, is because, you know, I've got people that I went to high school with who still live here, and they commute into, you know, basically the tech centers in Hillsborough back and forth. And I know there's plenty of people who commute back and forth who didn't grow up here. So I mean, part of it is that how, with the addition of the new housing stock that's coming into town, you know, how do we make the downtown a little more robust, so that people aren't, you know, necessarily spending their money outside of town, right? How do we create opportunities for them to like shop locally? Because right now there's really not many.
There's not many, but the 3 restaurants in the T&E, like we have enough to sustain those businesses. They're still in, so there's enough here to do it. We just have to find who's gonna come in and be successful at it.
Right, and the concern I have is, you know, when we look at sort of adding capacity to it, right, it's all of a sudden, you know, if, you know, when there's a game night, right, can everybody fit in Yamhill Grill and Chapo and
Right.
Larson House, right? Well, no, so what if there was, you know, again, an event here where you simply overwhelm it, right? And how do we, what's that? Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, absolutely. And 2, when you're adding, you know, when all the new houses over there by Beulah get built, right, that's, I mean, you know, all of a sudden the wait at Scoggins Coffee becomes, you know, maybe 3 times as long,
Absolutely,
right?
and I
so
think
how
that
do you
that's
how do you add capacity?
finding
Also, I
the
think-
right businesses.
A big part of being able to even find the right business and to add capacity to speak to both of those is to return the commercial buildings to commercial use instead of residential use.
Well, that's when I was talking about expanding the downtown core too is that you look at, so up and down like Highway 47, where there's a lot of those residences and stuff, like between basically, the gas station and downtown. You know, in other places, a lot of times those busy street front buildings get turned into, somebody's office, right? It becomes a hair salon, or it becomes an attorney's office or a CPA's office or something like that. I mean, it's how do you create a more flexible and inviting zoning environment so that you facilitate that sort of thing. And as we add more population, right, Yamhill grows from 1,000 people to 2,000 people, there becomes more opportunities, but there's no place for people to actually do that, right?
Philip, what do they call abandoned properties? Is blight? There's a word for.
Attractive nuisance?
That too.
I lived for those when I was in school growing up here. It's like, hey, that's abandoned. Let's go check it out. So this is not being recorded, is it?
Yes, it is.
How about a 25, 50, or 100-year infrastructure plan?
One of the things is too, that I think that's actually really important is, right now, especially with the governor just signed this big housing bill, and there's a lot of money that's floating out there for infrastructure.
Yes, sir.
It's looking at sort of how these cycles go and being prepared to execute on it when it happens, right? So right now, I would say we're not prepared to go out and access some of the capital sources that are there right now. So it's how do you sort of, maybe that 20, 50, 100 year, I don't know if those are the right numbers to use, but how is it that you prepare and say, here is what our capital needs are gonna be, coming down the pike, so that we have grants that just need to have a date filled in and be sent in, right? I mean, I don't know if you can be that level of prepared, but
Update master plans.
yeah, it's just part of it's being more nimble, or at least being able to be nimble when the time comes, so that you can access, grant opportunities or, other state and government windfalls. Without having to because part of it is a lot of these grant cycles have really short fuses when the time they're announced, the time you actually have to turn in stuff. And if you have to create a grant from the ground up in 2 weeks, 30 days, sometimes it's just not enough time, especially with infrastructure projects.
How about a professional grant writer?
There you go.
Angie, do we have somebody online?
I think Walt is raising his hand, but I'm not sure how long he's had his hand up.
Poor Walt.
Well, let's give him an
Walt, can
opportunity.
you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to raise my hand to let you know that I'm here listening in, and I'm finding this to be an absolute fascinating conversation. And thank you for inviting me.
I'm glad you're here, Walt. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Please feel free to unmute and chat with us when you have something to input.
Yes, Walt,
Okay.
you have a perspective too, so it'd be great to capture your thoughts.
Well, actually, I think everyone stole my thunder here. Everything you brought out, especially the long-range planning, and one of my biggest issues in city planning is infrastructure. And the fact that you're looking down the road is very commendable. I think also it'd be nice to do it all, but I think it is important to maybe start with some low-hanging fruit and go from there. But I'm just amazed at the breadth of interest and also the comments here. They're very, very encouraging.
And for the record, Walt is the city planner.
The plans, the strategic plan, people have mentioned the infrastructure plan, kind of comes under the comprehensive plan, doesn't it? Which needs to be updated. Our comprehensive plan is older, and I don't think we even have a transportation plan. People mention transportation, but there's a thing called, you do a transportation plan, you get a consultant, you do it, right? Well, what other plans are we behind on?
Okay, for the record, they just announced a new funding for transportation system plans, and I'm filling out the preliminary application, got the go-ahead from the mayor and city manager to follow up on that. So that's something that the city desperately needs and could very well take care of some of the issues on crossing downtown and also, safe paths to schools, that sort of thing. So we just have to wait till the funding is announced and hopefully we'll be in line.
So Walt, is that the pre-letter that goes into the TGM program?
Yeah,
Okay.
And a TGM program is?
Transportation Growth Management, which is a program that's administered by the Oregon Department of Transportation and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. It is, and we'll get into some of that when we get later, but those are some of the funding sources to do some things that you need to do. And yes, I did look at your comprehensive plan. It was available online, and it's like many communities of this size. It's old. It needs refreshing and updating.
and the code is also a little bit
That's another
creaky
big task.
as well.
I know one of the issues that we run into with infrastructure and grants is once the grants are eligible and they're out there, is actually coming up with the matching funds. And most small ag communities kind of run into that same conundrum. So just a way that we can kind of approach that and attack that from a financial end.
And water and water and water.
Absolutely.
I've lived here for 49 years and I came from northern Arizona where we had snow, pure water. And the first time I sat in the bathtub, I couldn't even see my legs. So I know we've improved since then, but we've been on the course of needing water all the years that I've lived here. And here we are still talking about needing water. So
Again, I'm gonna try to set a few seats. How about any of your issues with your electrical system? Your power? To have growth, you got to be able to turn on the lights. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I don't think that's.
And that's fine. I'm just, like I said,
We're pretty blessed to have a lot of power going to other places through us, so we get a tap all of that.
so what about your telecommunication?
Wi-Fi would be awesome. Rural Wi-Fi would be awesome. Starlink's about the best. No.
It is. Didn't know if it was specific.
PG&E. You're going up in the rates.
Yeah, they are going up. in rates.
PGE rate increase.
And we've got public safety on there, right? Public safety and general funding.
The peanut gallery is talking about natural gas.
Okay.
There's no natural gas here in town, is there?
No.
Yeah, okay.
No, but
Natural
the high
gas would be
pressure,
great.
but the high pressure line is just outside by the school, by the bus barn. Runs right through our town.
Oh, yeah, out by Strapel.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if we could get PG&E just to tap a line into the downtown district, they'd have at least, 40, 50 customers. That's the thing with, natural gas is you gotta have enough customers to support the issue.
Make it financially viable for them
Right.
to provide the service.
I think we could probably do that.
Well, not to set us back, but the engineers.
There is no back, no forward.
The engineers, we do have water and wastewater plans for 20 years, so just, I know people have brought that up. Those plans are already set for years.
So it comes in on ships, swimming. The trains.
What about wells? Do we have anything that we need to address as far as well support for,
People with wells, supporting people with
well,
wells.
with well or creating wells that actually work?
We don't, there's no wells to be had.
Okay. What about, for the city? You and I talked about another water source of some kind for the city.
Purple.
What was Purple Lines?
Yeah, the purple lines, and then we had.
Purple pipe.
And we had another reservoir, impound by the wastewater, or by the water treatment plant. That was one, an
So
offline.
an additional impound?
Mhm.
Okay,
Dredging.
dredging. dredging our.
And another, a big one
old
is,
town.
is possibly going out for a bond to increase our reservoirs.
We've got tanks on there, the storage tanks, but.
So that's your, increase your reservoir capacity.
Yeah.
For, with the increased water capacity, just wanted to ask if, you could keep in mind the water districts that are outside the rural water districts, because we have old contracts that just say that we're only allowed to buy excess water, so we're all kind of in limbo. And, you know, if those contracts could be updated as we're updating this infrastructure, it would be great, because there's a lot of people that can't drill wells, because it's not a good place to drill a well. So they're kind of stuck.
That's a good point.
How's your government relations with other government entities? So with the school district, with the fire district, with the county, to your neighboring cities? Is there any issues that you would identify, or? All's good?
Good,
It's
Yeah,
good.
we
And I'm
communicate
just forwarding
well.
today.
Meet regularly,
Yeah, we meet regularly.
yeah.
I think we should celebrate that. We're not wasting any time grinding on each other. It's beautiful. The fire department, everybody is just all going the same direction. There's a lot of towns that aren't like that.
Yeah, there's
Do you-
uniformly, when I talk to people about Yamhill and trying to find capital sources for anything, everybody's always like, yeah, Yamhill needs it, and we're happy to help. So, I mean, Yamhill is not seen as
No.
as a negative place at all.
Do you ever, or have you ever had joint meetings between city council and the school board, city council, the fire district board? Have you had any of those kinds of events? Anybody can remember?
If they've happened, not lately.
Is that something you might find advantageous? Something you want to add to the list?
I think that should go on the list, yeah.
I'd like to see the city hire a lobbyist. Lobbyist, oh yeah, somebody could go there and fight for us all the time.
A grant writer / lobbyist.
But to add that collaboratively, because the city council and the fire board don't meet regularly, but there are some of the city and the other entities that meet regularly. So we have great collaboration, great networking, and great communication.
And you have your chiefs association. I mean, you've got the League of Oregon Cities, you've got associations you belong to, so.
10 acronyms.
Yeah. In our worlds, in Walt's world, we live in acronyms.
Yeah.
Alphabet soup.
And we participate in all of those.
You're talking about getting together as commit with other organizations. But as many things as we go to, all of us, there is so little input from the city. And I know that, I mean, I've got adult grandkids that live in this town with children. And I know how precious time is once they get off work because they're raising kids. But, you know, people don't even know what's going on in this town. And it's because they just don't have time to think about it. And finding a way to get more community involvement. And being on the Economic Development Committee, that's one of the things that we're talking about, because we're looking at ways to gain some money through grants or whatever. And one of the things that we looked at specifically was trying to bring the community together. And I know that everybody here that's in leadership knows that everything you do, you can blast email, or you can put a note on this water bill, and you get this many people, you know? And so I don't know how, but if there's a way of creating an interest that would bring more because it's input like this that's gonna make something like this work. I mean, that's just, and it doesn't, the same people that regurgitate the same thing day after day after day, if it's not gonna bring the community together, it's never gonna really help this town. Because I know the things that's been going on in this town for so many years, and we're still regurgitating things that were there 25 years ago and longer. And we don't get the community involved, so we gotta find a way to do that.
How about medical services? Any issues there?
Mac or Newburgh.
I was just gonna say, leave town, it's great.
Yeah.
Before we go past what she was saying. I think that we have good outreach in the community with, in a few small ways, the Economic Development Committee, the Water Committee, the Budget Committee. Have we got one yet? These are ways to go out in the community with city government. And we want to revitalize those, celebrate those people, give them a voice, a place at meetings. They feel like they're accomplishing something, but there's probably other committees that could be, we could ask citizens to get involved with. So I would say just maintain our current committees and expand out into the community with, and that's the way to get involvement. It may give somebody
The churches, maybe.
a mission.
Yeah, maybe the churches.
Somehow you gotta connect with the people that are living here and driving to Hillsborough every day. Because those people are coming home, doing their thing, going to work, coming home, doing their thing. So they're not involved with any of the city
Right.
stuff that goes on.
And that's one of the things too, that at least, contextually, when you look at this stuff, when you're talking about, businesses in the downtown core,
Sure.
right? So you create places where people run into each other like routinely and gather. And then, of course, the parks and then the sports stuff. I mean, when I was a kid growing up here, the entire town went to football
Football
games,
games, you bet.
right? And that I have found is, somewhat unique. So it's just giving people a reason to get together, right? And especially if it's around their kids, so the sports and parks idea, I think that really kind of vibes with the whole, keep it Yamhill. And it gives people the ability to run into each other and
Sure.
share a story and say, hey, do you know what's going on? And, what are you doing? I'm doing this, and you should volunteer too.
That's why I think that a lot of people live in town probably don't even know half their neighbors. They live out in the rural, you know the neighbors, mainly
Right.
for protection and
Yeah.
other reasons, but
Oh, yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, we never drove with two hands on the wheel here because you're always waving at somebody that you were passing because you knew who everybody was.
somehow we gotta connect with that.
Well, and along
Part of
those,
the town that doesn't connect.
along the line with the sports things, we're in a little bit of a unique situation as well with our middle school and our high school having a connected campus, and we have access to 3 gyms. So if we try to maybe put on tournaments or,
That's a school thing, in all reality.
but if you were able to work with the schools where we could do something that brought in.
Do you have community events like a summer concert series or, those types of things I know are very helpful with.
Derby days,
Derby
about the
days.
only community event.
We have
that
the
have.
Friday night,
And
Friday summer nights or something.
yeah, and then, YDA, we kind of co-sponsor some stuff with Larson House in what's the backyard behind the building and stuff. So there's
Beverly
music.
Cleary Day.
Beverly Cleary Day.
And your run.
The fire department.
Yeah, the 5K run, which we did last year, which was crazy popular.
I think a few summertime events though can really help.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fire department was hosting, they had a movie night up at the park.
Yeah, those things are.
What about,
And the bingo night. The bingo night's been really
Everybody
popular.
loves a bingo night.
Right?
building stronger teamwork, community type
Sort of idea around.
relationship with everyone and all the different organizations.
Say that.
They talked about it, but.
Building stronger community connection.
Yeah, like what we're doing now compared to everyone doing their own thing.
And volunteer appreciation. Yeah.
I was gonna follow up on that, because the question came up about, or the comment came up about the volunteers and so forth. Does the city do any kind of volunteer or committee appreciation type event?
We need
If
to.
it's come in at 4 o'clock and have cake and cookies or?
Nope. Or an employee appreciation, that's not done either.
Even though the employees are appreciated.
They are very
Thanks,
much
everybody.
appreciated.
Well, Kim worked, what, 25 years? We finally gave her some. She's gone.
She's gone.
And the chief just got himself a new vehicle.
That's part of his budgeting.
Yeah.
Somebody else is getting an old vehicle for another year.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably goes down to Travis.
Changing focus a little bit more kind of from just purely the city government perspective. Are there ideas? Now, we've talked about infrastructure, we talked about public safety, so forth, but are there things as you go through annual budget process and so forth that you've identified as like, boy, I really wish we could do that, but we just don't have the human capital or the financial capital to do it, and so it just never happens?
All of those.
All of this?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's, I was gonna say, that's very, very accurate, because, you know, obviously, everybody's a volunteer except for the very, you know, small number of city staff. You know, the YDA, we talk with the city and help where we can, and, you know, a lot of volunteer hours go into trying to get ideas evolved enough where they can come to the city and be, you know, thought about, right? And so that's part of it is that, you know, we all sort of, I guess the funny thing is that because everybody knows everybody and works together, there are certain silos of responsibility that we sort of work outside of, right? So Mayor Potter will ask us to like find out certain things and then we bring it back to the city, but the city is the one who has to act on it, right? And so even if they don't have the time to act on it and vice versa, right? There's things that we need to do that we can't because we're not a city, we're a 501c3, right? So there's a lot of crossover and things that will, and I don't know really how to articulate this. There's a lot of things that where we overlap and can benefit one another. It's just that nobody has the entire bandwidth to do it.
Like the Christmas lighting and the Christmas
Yeah.
celebration and.
Yeah, I mean, we're really good at what we do. It's just adding capacity to the things that we need to be doing. And that wasn't a complaint. That was just a.
No,
Right.
it's true.
Yeah.
We work together to the capacity that we have, but increasing that capacity would be lovely.
Yes.
Other ideas, thoughts, opinions, views?
Infrastructure.
Got that one.
Did we put parking on there?
Yeah, parking's on there,
Is it good?
yeah. Cause there's that building in between the bank and you know, they've tried to several businesses in that building, but there's no parking.
Oh, the little red house, yeah. It was the coffee shop,
Yeah.
Yeah.
street
Well,
parking.
that's again, abandoned property that's
Like to get together with people.
Say that again?
a blight on the city.
Activities like to get
You
together.
should be able to
with
like
people.
have some code enforcement happen
Should be
there.
something, yeah. And not just that, but other blight properties would be helpful.
Please fix your property or have an insurance fire. We don't care which.
One or the other. Just don't build in Dollar General.
The fire department. police
Piggyback
department,
on some of the-
specialized-
Hold just a second.
Back up on the medical.
Yeah.
So we have first responders that have specialized training and the fire department that have, what's the word for it? The fire department has for
EMRs and EMTs.
those acronyms.
Yeah, you get me from having a stroke.
So the EMRs and EMTs, which collaborates with fire department.
Okay.
And Shelley?
You got one right here.
Oh, I was just saying to piggyback on some of the community activities, maybe add like farmer's market, that would do well here. And then like a community celebration that's like celebrate the anniversary of Yamhill and bring everyone together and throw like a street party. Give some incentives for people to come out and learn what the city's doing, but also have some fun together and communicate and socialize, and just build community that way.
Yeah. How many cities can say they're 130 plus years old?
Yeah.
Not many.
On the farmer's market, we actually have done some groundwork on that. It's just that we haven't been able to execute on it because there's capacity issues. So, no, we've got a place to hold it. We've got everything. We've actually got some partners that are lined up. It's just taking it from, you know, in the head onto the written page so that we can create a plan so that everybody can execute on the plan. Yeah, so if you wanna hop on board and volunteer, yeah, we'd love to have the help, so.
I'll keep asking. Any other ideas? Okay. Not hearing anything, maybe this is a
Break
good
time.
time for a 10-minute break. Chat. Maybe one of the restrooms in the back, right?
Yeah, I didn't tell everybody, the restrooms are in the kitchen to the right. Restrooms 1.
All right, we'll take
For rejoining us.
So you, hopefully everybody refreshed. Come on, chief, sit on down. I'm gonna give everybody one last opportunity, because sometimes in those breaks, conversations come up and all of a sudden, light bulb goes off and I forgot to mention something. So
With that, I'd like to go online and allow the city staff and the contracted staff to have an opportunity to also share their ideas. So Chris Livingston and John Christensen, will you please unmute and provide us your inputs or your thoughts?
Actually, I was texting Greg, so he brought up the one thing I'd brought up, or actually the two things, but. So, no, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Christensen, are you still online? Did he run away?
No, he's raising his hand. I have you unmuted on my end, so are you muted on your end, John?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Yeah, the great discussion the first hour there. Obviously, a lot of talk about infrastructure, and infrastructure planning is really where I come in the picture here. So the city does have some good capital improvement plans in place with water and wastewater 20-year plans that are still in effect. TSP is one thing that was mentioned that is lacking, and that's certainly something to look at in the future here. But nothing additional to add at this time.
Excellent. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, for making sure we picked up staff. Anybody else have any additional thoughts, ideas?
Transportation.
Just transportation, period?
Yeah, I wondered what TSP stood for. They said-
Transportation System Plan.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. My brain is full of alphabet soup of acronyms. Anything else?
It looks like we have raised hands. Do we? No. No? Okay. We don't.
Okay.
No, we do now.
Walt
Walt is raising his hand now.
No. Okay.
No, I actually took the hand down, my error.
All right then. So I pledged to the mayor that we would go no longer than 2 hours. If we end early, that's okay. We're essentially down, we got two more topics to get through. So next one is on your options to move forward. So you've come up with a lot of great ideas, things you're doing well, things you would like to do, things that are way out into the future when you start talking, infrastructure plans at 50 and 75 years. Jason's aware of this, in Oregon's system, everything's planned on a 20-year horizon, except for water. And water is a community I was working for as we started talking 9 years ago about we need to be thinking 75 years out in the future about what the water source is going to be. Because if you have wells, they go dry. If you have water rights, if you were on the Willamette, it depends upon where you're at and seniority on that. And you could have a junior right, and a senior right takes your water right away, and all of a sudden you get up in the morning and you turn on the water and there's no shower. And that's never a good thing. So thinking about my chicken scratch, again, I can read it, you probably can't. One of the things that really comes up in all of this is who leads what? Always the biggest challenge I've gleaned out of my career of doing this. Come up with great ideas, but I have to be candid, that's who I am, is that the other organizations that you partner with and collaborate with and so forth, they're effectively on 2-year cycles. So what you think is important today may not be important 2 years from now or 4 years from now. Somebody in an elected position chooses, I've had enough, I want some of my life back, spend time with family, friends, and so forth. And so they choose not to rerun. It's just an example. And somebody new comes in and they've got a different idea or thoughts or opinions and views. And so where you're at in Yamhill, between the city council, the fire district, and the school district, the three primary ones, and then you got the broader piece in the county, is that those cycles change all the time. So one of the things I've found is these kinds of processes that we went through tonight, you know, it took an hour to just do the briefs and stuff. I pledged to myself I was not going to make you do dot exercises. I'm so over dot exercises. I wasn't going to make you get up and write anything. It was more, you speak, share your views, opinions, ideas. I'll capture it all. Like I said earlier, I'll report back to there. And then you'll have to figure out what you do with it moving forward from there. But it comes to who leads, because you as the city council, you cannot do everything. Your partners have to do things as well. And communities I've seen that function very well is that there is that support mechanism, and you brought it up tonight, is that if you have a particular need, you can go talk with another organization, and I'll use that term broadly, and if they've got capacity, they will help. If another organization has a need, but they don't have all the capacity, hopefully they can come to the city and say, can you help? Doesn't always mean you have to give money. Sometimes it's just giving human capital and some resources, some time, and so forth. But who leads is really important. So when this report comes back to you, I want you to keep that in mind, is who does it? So who does the parks? Somebody, you know, talk about a bike park, you talk about trails. Okay. Youth love it. Somebody's got to lead it. Who's going to do the fundraising? Who's going to go write the grants to try to get the money to be able to do that? Who's going to do the contract administration? Who might be contractors, volunteers, volunteer labor, volunteer material to help defray and reduce your overall costs for that project. But somebody has to lead. And what I have seen in communities from very large to very small is that if you have someone who leads, but then for whatever reason, they're no longer in that leadership position, it does this. And I've seen it over and over and over again. And so how do you build those systems that when you do have these leadership changes, that the priorities are still the same, and somebody then backfills into that particular process. I had mentioned kind of the very beginning of all of this about goals, and I am going through goal setting processes are sometimes can be problematic. They can be laborious. They can be full days. They can be half day events and so forth. But for any of the organizations, if the school district and the fire district would hear, I would say it anyway, is that every organization should have some goals. I would encourage the city council to have some council goals. It helps in your budget process to know what your priorities are. You're going to have a whole plethora of things that you could do. But from a city government perspective, and the elected officials, is out of this, given your financial resources, what can you do? What would you want to focus on over that budget cycle? I'm always a big believer in also doing 5-year budgeting plans and having a picture that looks out, because it helps you when you do your fiscal year budget. But having goals, and so, you know, as I mentioned, and it's not that it's bad, it's just like, I didn't find any city council goals. It's just like, okay, well, maybe that's a starting point. Maybe it's not. Maybe other things are more important. That's for all of you to decide.
If I can interject, there are goals. We did have workshops and the council does have goals set. One of them is probably why we're here, is for communication.
Okay.
So there are goals set. It's just maybe not put on our city website.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, we do have goals.
One of the things that I will say too is, like, you know, so Newburgh, which obviously we know, so when the new city council came in, they established, was it 10 goals? Doug, 7 goals, something like that?
Yep.
Yeah, and so as somebody who is doing business in the community and also involved in other organizations, when you say, okay, we need to do something, right, whatever that may be is, and you can go to like the, you know, because the goals, council's goals are published, and you can say, okay, I want to do this, and it is goal number 7 on the city council. right? I know that I'm gonna actually have an ear when I go and say, hey, I need this thing, or, we wanna do that thing. So it's really helpful to actually have all this stuff like spelled out and written out.
It helps, again, these are my observations, doing it for decades, is having some clearly articulated goals. You should have no more than 5 to 7, in my opinion, not that it's right or it's wrong. Is it helps because as the public comes to you and is looking for things, you want to relate back to what your priorities are. What are your goals? Your budget should align with your goals. And then, so when the issue du jour comes up, you have something that you, as the elected leaders, can discuss or discuss with your staff is this issue du jour important enough to usurp what our goals are and what we've already been focused on and where we've allocated our dollars to. I've seen many times is that the issue du jour override goals because everybody wants to make everybody happy. But sometimes, as the elected officials, you're all volunteers, you have to make the hard choices, you have to make the hard decisions. And the staff, you have to give that guidance, that input to your elected officials. And when you get a new city administrator, to help them make those particular decisions. Again, there is never one right or one wrong way. There's just ways they get done. How do you want to function and how do you want to operate as an organization? Yes, sir.
Would a CIP be kind of a goal-oriented outlook for the city?
CIPs are a really good tool to address your infrastructure and what your priorities are going to be on an annual basis. So if you have a 5-year capital improvement program, so CIP, capital improvement program, and you lay that out and you run your 5-year financial modeling out or your projections out, and you understand what your income resources are and or what grants you might go try to do, it helps you then focus on any one given year what you're going to do for sewer, water, storm, and your transportation infrastructure improvements.
That's a rolling document.
And it's a roll that it rolls every year.
Right.
So what was in year 5 becomes year 4, year 2 becomes 1, and then a new list, because you've got this long master list, what then comes on and becomes year 5.
Doug, is he maybe talking about more of a strategic plan then with the council goals for the long-term vision of the city?
We're gonna get into that. And so there's some different ways to do different things. As I tried to, when I was preparing for this, tried to hone it down to kind of 2 things. So you've got a lot of stuff here. And so I've done, and again, I'm not telling you it's right, but I've managed and put together a couple of community visioning programs and then participated in the community I live in their community visioning program. But it's a tool to help engage as many of your citizens and your businesses as possible about the future for your community. And again, we typically look at about a 20-year horizon. So in a community visioning program, you have to allocate resources. So here's where I start to throw some numbers out and you'll get a little bit of sticker shock. If you were to go out to the consultant marketplace to do a community visioning program today, it would probably cost you somewhere around $250,000 to about $350,000. It's a big expense. So the first one I did was $250,000. That one, we had an urban renewal program. Urban renewal program bought some city land. City that generated the cash in order to do the community visioning program. That was the only way we could make it work. They just didn't have the resources. When I was in Newburgh, we did a community visioning program, and we had our financial limitations of what we could and could not do. And so I was charged with trying to come up with a creative way. So I went to the University of Oregon, and through their Institute of Policy Research and Engagement, you'll get this all coming back and give you the web links as well, is they have a program called Resource Assistance for Rural Environments called RARE. Kind of falls under the umbrella of AmeriCorps. And so there are young, very bright, intelligent individuals from around the country trying to find their way, and they sign up to be in the RARE program. And so I did the outreach, knew some people down there, did the preamble stuff with them, had to write the grant. And it was long. But we were able to get a RARE participant to come in. And costs have gone up a little bit. We did this in 2018 in Newburgh. And, but the overall cost in was $150,000 plus staff time. It was my time, other departments' time, and so forth, our engineering staff, our city manager's office, library and so forth. But out of that 150, it was about 25,000 of it was computers, phones, office supplies, materials and so forth that they needed to go out and do community events. Put on, we did a whole series of community events. But the RARE program pays for most of the cost of the RARE participant. You have a match that you have to do. And so you usually get a RARE participant for about 10 months. Our community visioning program took 13, so we hired them back as a temporary employee to finish up the project. But it was a much more economical way to try to do a community visioning program. But in those programs, I would always encourage, you set up a citizens committee that manages it. They do reports on a cycle that the city council establishes about where we're at in the process and the progress of doing this. But there's survey work, there's a series of hosts of meetings with community members and businesses to gather all this. And they kind of do a lot of this stuff. Here you would have a start, but they go through that because you're trying to get as much involvement in a community visioning program as possible to have as many opportunities. And what these documents will end up looking like, if anybody wanted to go search now, you can go search on Newburgh's in their community development. There's a web page and you can see the document. The one I did in Tualatin some years ago, it's been completely refreshed and so forth, but it's still going on. And so, I mean, it's been 15 plus, almost 20 years, and they're still using it. It's a tool. And you refresh these documents about every 5 years or so. But it helps different organizations also understand, when I was talking about who leads what, in those kind of documents, you lay out elements such as topic areas. So you got a topic vision, you got a goal, you got strategies, you identify who the lead organization is, and then you have kind of a general implementation timeline theme so everybody can see it. So these are all graphics in design for those who into design software. So the last one we did in the last community I worked for, that committee and the community came up with these topic areas: community engagement, you've talked about that tonight, community leadership, cultural assets, arts and culture, economic development, we're talking some about that tonight, livability and development, so we've talked about UGBs and housing and new businesses and so forth. And so that's what that community came up with. The one I did prior to that came up with a different set of categories. But it's a document that also helps the council as elected officials about which focus and prioritize on. So the question about a CIP, a capital improvement program, CIP may be one of the actions that comes out if you have a category of infrastructure that it gets done every year so that you know. Now, there are downfalls to doing a community visioning program. And that gets back to the election cycle every 2 years. So I mentioned the one I did in Tualatin, here it is roughly 20 years later, they're still using it. They're vested in it. They've had repeated leaders. The current mayor was on the committee way back when we started all of this. And so there's that synergy that moves forward. In the last one that I did, the leadership that was there that supported it all is no longer there. And so it's waned. The city was doing its portion, implementing its portion of the community visioning. But we also went into a pandemic, so two different socioeconomic cycles took place. We went into a pandemic, everybody was locked down, we weren't meeting with each other. It was difficult to coordinate with the other organizations that were leading particular topic areas and getting the information for annual reports and so forth. So you have to be aware of that. But from your land use perspective, they're also a very good tool because it helps you, because one of the things that came up was identifying you need to update your comprehensive plan. Community visioning and all the things that are identified in there can help you in rewriting and updating your community visioning program. Your comp plan, there are things that are required by state law and statewide planning goals, but there are other elements of actions and strategies and so forth that help so that you have kind of this community visioning thing that sits over here. It's not a land use document. You don't want it to be, but it helps inform what your comprehensive plan is going to be. And your comprehensive plan is good for 20 years. Your community visioning program is good for 20 years. So that's one method. Again, not saying that's right, it's wrong. It's something the third option of that one was where I live in Sherwood, is that I participated in that community visioning program, but they've continued to use it as well for what they're trying to plan for their future. I haven't seen any updates to it. Let's see, when they did that community vision program, it was 2017 or so. So I haven't seen any updates. Another possibility is it's a program called Strategic Doing. So this was a program that started out of from Purdue University, out of the Agile Lab. It's now moved, I think it's to Southern Alabama University. But there were a group of us in Yamhill County who went down to the U of O to the IPRE program. And we spent several days and got trained up. We got grant funds, we wrote grants. And so we got money from the Ford Foundation and so forth. And so we got all scaled up and we were going around the county doing strategic doing. Strategic doing is not strategic planning. So where the community visioning piece kind of fits over into that strategic planning umbrella, strategic doing is the actual implementation, make all this stuff happen. Some people say, well, we want to do strategic doing first. Okay, if you've got a discrete enough topic area that you want to deal with, you can use that. But if you were looking at something that was broader in scale, the strategic planning part, the strategic doing process doesn't do that. And that's not that I'm promoting, I'm just giving you examples of programs that I've been trained in. But there are 9 rules to strategic doing. It's a day-long process. And it usually, you break people down into groups of about 7. There are framing questions. There's a lot of time to make sure the question is correctly being asked because it will drive what the outcome is. If you have a bad question, you'll get a bad outcome. But some of the rules, the rules in that process are, you have to create a safe place for deep and focused conversation. It's being pleasant, so just even like your sheet that's up on the podium up there, there's processes. You have this framing question or questions. You go through a process that shares all of your community assets. And these assets are physical, skill sets, social assets, and capital assets. And so in these groups of 7, they talk about all that. And there's a model box and it has 4 quadrants to it. And everybody puts what their assets are. And then you get into a conversation about, well, what are hidden assets? It may not be an asset that you have, but it's an asset that you are aware somebody else has. So you capture all of this information. So you have somebody facilitating the discussion, you have a scribe capturing all the information for each of these groups. And then there's usually a facilitator is floating around amongst the 3 or 4. You go through brainstorming opportunities like we did this evening. The next rule 5 in that process is you reduce those ideas down to what's called the low hanging fruit. And that's called the Big Easy Project. So back when I'm making the comment, you can't eat the elephant all at once. You got to break it down in pieces that are small enough that community members and participants can be engaged in. If you give them an engagement timeline that says it's going to take 3 years to do, you'll probably lose a lot of people. If you select a project and you say, I need 5 months of your time commitment, it's easy because you've got human capital, you've got the financial capital, you've got other resources available, and you can get it done and you can have success. Then the 6th rule is strategic outcomes. And so you're creating the plan of how you've identified it. Now you create the plan of how you're going to make it happen and within a prescribed timeline. That project then becomes what's called your Pathfinder project. And then you start to break it down into short-term actions. So somebody, again, has to be the leader. Somebody out of that group of roughly 7 is going to say, I'm going to be the champion of this. I'm going to be contacting all of you. I'm going to make sure that every one of you has a task. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back and meet again in 30 days. It could be a virtual meeting. It could be in person. It could be a hybrid. And everybody reports back about where they're at, that they completed that portion of their task. And so there may be 12 tasks. There's only 7. So you only get the first 7 done, or maybe the first 7, it takes several months to do, but you don't get it done in the first 30 days, but you can get it done in 60 days. And then you communicate those meetings for as long as they're necessary, however long that project may be, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. But then at the end of all that is the bigger group comes back together in a set time and you start to report out about what you did and if you were successful or not. So we've done this. We started this pre-pandemic using the process here in the county. It was called the collaborative. And so we did it through the county with some work that they were focusing on at the time. We did it with the city of Yamhill when they were dealing with their homeless issues. We had a bunch of different groups. We did it with the Cultural Coalition. We did it with the city of Amity. There was another one, I have to remember what it was. I've used it a little bit with budgeting processes as well. And so there's some pieces of this that you can pull out. It's more of the kind of the brainstorming component of it. But again, it's not strategic planning. So our topic tonight was a strategy. So this process is how do you achieve and make it happen after you've come up with the particular strategy. There may be other ideas out there about how you do this as well, and maybe it comes from all of you. You may have ideas, different processes that you've used, something you've read about. I think those should always be on the table for the council to consider, or at least information coming from the public to the council for you to be able to consider. Because not every tool or system that's out there is the right tool or system for you. You have to find the ones that will work for you. Resources is always a big issue. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. Some organizations that I know have worked in Yamhill County is RDI, the Rural Development Initiatives. They've done some stuff here in Yamhill in the past as well. I mentioned the Institute for Policy and Research and Engagement down to U of O. And Walt's aware of this, the Chinook Institute, if you're looking for training on leadership and so forth, they do that. League of Oregon Cities provides training for elected officials as well. The Oregon chapter of the American Planning Association does some trainings as well. For the Planning Commission side, between the Oregon chapter of the American Planning Association and the Department of Land Conservation and Development, they try to put on some trainings for planning commissioners. I would always encourage people to go to take those trainings if it's all possible. Walt can give you more information on that. DLCD has different grants that are available. So I mentioned earlier, there's 2 grants that you've already received. There may be others to help you do these things from other different state organizations. It doesn't have to be from DLCD. Tourism, Oregon tourism
Yeah.
is one of them. State parks might be another one. It just depends. But it takes somebody who has to monitor. Well, first of all, you have to figure out what it is you want to do. And then you have to have somebody to go do the research to see what grants are available. And then you have to see if the timing fits into what you're trying to do that you've already established. And sometimes it doesn't work and you have to wait a year before you can submit the grant. Hopefully you get it. Sometimes you don't. That's part of it. DLCD has a small cities grant program for communities under 2,500, and these are on a biennium. When I looked at the list for Yamhill, I did not, the most recent was for the 23-25 biennium. I didn't see Yamhill on there, but it's a way to get a couple $1,000s. So again, if you identify what some priorities are, and there's some money out there, you got somebody who can write the grant, and it's either a $2,000 project or it's a $4,000 project, and city puts into. There's different ways to do that. Mentioned the TGM. Now, Walt mentioned that earlier. The Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments is another resource that's out there who can help council goal processes. There's also private consultants who do that particular work. The COG typically anymore, the councils of governments, they really don't have the grant funds that they used to, but sometimes they get grant funds through a program. I know my prior employer, we got some excess funds that were not used, and we were able to capture those dollars and then turn around and give those dollars back to our Chamber of Commerce and our downtown association to do specific things over a year. So, but it took somebody had to write the contracts, get everything approved and so forth. But those, again, they're opportunities. And then there's always the different foundations that are out there. And there's a plethora of them. I was doing my research. There are about a little over 1,700 different foundations in Oregon that give away money for different things. What things you may want to do don't fit into some of these foundations of what their mission is, what they're trying to achieve. But one that's local, and that is the Austin Family Foundation. And so they did a whole report that was there, and they're looking to help communities in Yamhill County if your project aligns with what their mission is and what they're trying to achieve. But there are a lot of other foundations that are out there. The Ford Family Foundation, I mentioned when we put together the strategic doing process in Yamhill County, that's where we got part of our money. And we applied, we had a champion that situation because we had a council member who works for the Ford Family Foundation. She couldn't be involved, but she was able to connect us with the right people to have the conversations with. Sometimes getting your foot in the door is the hardest part. Once you got your foot in the door, then you can have those conversations. Oregon Community Foundation. So these foundations, based upon a short list, you know, they could range in that they have financial assets in the $400,000 range up to almost $100 million. Doesn't mean, again, projects you may come up with fit in to what their mission is and what they're willing to fund, and they're always highly competitive. But small communities in Oregon live on grants. You don't have the financial resources. We all know in Oregon, if you worked in government, pre-Measure 5, post-Measure 5, is that it's always a struggle to try to find the dollars in order to provide the services that your community and your citizens and your businesses are hoping that they're going to get.
I'm going to interject here. So one of the things that is important with like putting kind of a bow on some of the things that Doug is saying is that the community visioning process, whether it is something that's big and fancy and ornate or something that we manage to put together, but actually have a written living document, that is something that a lot of these foundations want to see in order to give money. So it's very, very difficult to go to them without some sort of strategic plan, and because they're not just giving money, they're investing in communities. That's the way they look at it. And so if it was just giving us money, that's one thing, but they're not doing that. So they want to know that we actually have a plan of attack, and that plan of attack is widely endorsed by the citizenry. So that's where a lot of that strategic planning comes in is that, you know, we've actually taken the time to ask people, what do you want? Right? And then memorialize that in some way and then created a forward plan and then go and ask for the money. And I found that when you have those things all lined up, that the money wouldn't say it flows easily, but boy, it sure, you know, I mean, it's out there. So
There's money out there.
And just, I mean, as an inspirational example, there's a project that we're working on. We're in for $3.1 million of federal funds for this project. And there's no other competitors in the space for this money. So, a nonprofit organization that I'm involved in. And so, you know, we have our total budget was $4.1 million. We had to carve out $1 million of it because there was a portion of the project that is disallowed by this particular funding chunk, which is weird and inconvenient, but it is what it is. But the fact is that we took a fully baked plan to our Senate and congressional representatives, and they said, this is where you go to find the money, let us help you. And so these things are possible, so.
The other piece is interns. And so I brought this up. And so when the organization I was working for, when we hired the rare participant, who was like an intern, they were compensated for all of their services, but finding interns, you have to make sure you follow the labor laws because they've gotten much more complicated as time has gone on. But if you were looking to do some stuff on the land use side and it was a smaller project, it's getting a hold of Portland State University and tying in with them, because now would be the time to talking with them so that they can talk with the graduate students who need to do some practicum intern opportunities to be able to plug in and say, yes, you know, we have something for, you know, when you get out of school middle of June 10th or 15th, whatever the date is, until you go back to school on September 15th, we've got these 2 or 3 discrete smaller projects that will cost you a minimal amount of money. You're gonna have to compensate them something. But that's another way to try to get some of these lower hanging fruit things, once you identify what the low hanging fruit is, to get it accomplished.
And I'm gonna interject again here too. So when I was participating in the Road Improvement Action Committee, which is a county committee, one of the things that REACT does is that they have George Fox engineering students. Every year, they pick 3 specific intersections within the county and redesign those intersections. And those intersections are ranked on, you know, basically problematic to, you know, would be nice. And you know, some of them will never get done because there were specific cost challenges to redesigning the intersections. But the fact is that they created very in-depth professional documents for the committee to review, and then it got passed forward to Public Works and then on to the commissioners if it was actionable. And so, you know, it's a good way, one, for people to get experience, but 2, for you to get work done at a really reasonable cost.
So,
Question. How big a role does the city administrator play in these processes?
A lot,
So we have
in my opinion.
And Greg is amazing. He's doing 2 jobs, but I think you tell us 4 jobs. You tell us how much of a city administrator do we have right now if in compared to if we hired one? Are you just like barely hanging on? I mean, my point is we are hamstrung without a city administrator, I think, right or wrong, in these process.
I'll give you an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Please. You need a city administrator to deal with the daily functions of the organization and the running of the organizations.
Not it.
To deal with the financial issues, to deal with the contracts, to deal with the labor issues and so forth. My opinion, again, you start to have exposure when the elected officials are doing the administrative functions. Because it creates an interesting dynamic between the employees and the elected official, who's the policymakers. As a planning commissioner, you're appointed, but you have a very discrete box of what you focus on and what you do. I have worked with organizations where there have been transitions between administrators and or city managers that are in place, but they've always tried to keep that window very narrow in that transition timeframe. Sometimes they've gone out and gone through their circuit rider, city managers that have been retired, who are willing to come in and work on a short time basis and not full time even, but you know, they're here a couple of days a week just to keep things going until a new administrative head is hired. I'm always concerned when elected officials take on the administrative role because it opens them up to a completely different dynamic, which they did not run for office for that.
You're describing a problem that they have had, it's big, but not related to this. I want to make, we're looking for goals. Yeah, we need an administrator to take care of those problems, but we need, if we have goals, right up in the top is hire a city administrator. This is gonna be really.
To deal with all this.
It'll be a big problem, yeah, to deal with a lot of it. And this organization you talked about called the committee, no, the collective.
Council,
No, the collective is.
The collaborative that we.
The collaborative network in Newburgh that kind of did your version of this, is that right?
No, the collaborative was dealing with a variety of different organizations and entities within Yamhill County to do this kind of stuff. Again, in that process, this brainstorming was just one step of a 9-step process. So we've done one step out of that particular program.
My point is just, we need a city administrator,
Yes.
just on top of all of this. Probably a good idea.
A runner.
So I promised the mayor that we would be done at 7:30. It's 7:32. I'm 2 minutes over, so I'm gonna get punished. I'm gonna get docked, so to speak. Get gavelled down. But that's what I had for you. I hope that you got some benefit out of this. Like I said, I will write up all the notes and so forth and get them back to the mayor. The mayor, they
We
can
will post
share
that
and
on the city
distribute
website.
accordingly. I wish you luck. I really do wish you luck. You want to do it all. You're starting to see a picture of what that all means, but you can't do it all at once. It's just not humanly possible.
We have a start to the to-do list.
You have a start. Yes, you do. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.